Hey, welcome to the Art Condition Podcast, a weekly show that will discuss the business, community, and often undiscussed stress and mental health concerns of being a professional artist, or even a serious hobbyist. I'm Joby. I've been in the tattoo and illustration professions for 25 years. My co-host is Moose, a data analyst, social media manager, and art agent. If you enjoy the content, please consider visiting the Patreon page in the show notes to help support the effort. Or if that's not an option, please like, subscribe, leave a good review, or just share with your friends. And definitely go visit the links of our guests on this episode. Thanks for listening, and have a great day. This week we are talking to Ethan S. Brewerton. Ethan is a freelance illustrator and comic artist with a lot of experience running successful Kickstarter campaigns for both digital and physical goods. We start off talking to Ethan a little about his work in comics and illustration to set the stage and give a little bit of insight into a creative profession we haven't explored very much on this podcast. I hope to do so more in the future. From there, we go into a deep dive of Ethan's Kickstarter projects of the recent past. We purposefully arranged the conversation so that we would be able to carefully analyze each step along the way when organizing and running a Kickstarter campaign. We talk about how to lay the groundwork before you launch your campaign, how to start it, what happens during the lifespan of the live campaign, and how to handle everything that needs to happen once your campaign ends. If there is anything you ever wanted to know about Kickstarter, this is the episode to listen to. Here's our conversation with Ethan S. Brewerton. Okay, Ethan, the floor is yours. Just go the next 2 hours, nonstop.
Oh God, you've seen my streams. You know I can't do that.
Start drawing.
Don't tempt me.
Thank you so much for being here, man. I've been looking forward to this and really appreciate you giving us some time.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive right into it. Give us a little bit of background on yourself. How did you get into art, and how did it suck you down into the dark, murky depths to hold you forever?
Starting with the hard questions. So I grew up in Connecticut, kind of like wandering the forest behind my house. And I was kind of always fascinated with like the mystery of like what could be out there. And I was also into like building things. So like making things that weren't already there. Started with like building forts and stuff like that. Then, I found out that Legos existed, started making stuff like that. And that's actually what got me into like drawing, is like wanting to create things, but not necessarily having the material to do it, or the resources to do it. And so I would start drawing it to get these ideas out of my head. And then, but I didn't really think about it as like a thing that I did. Like, it wasn't like drawing for any other purpose, really. It was just to create something, to explain something, basically. But when I was younger, my grandmother was doing a lot of pottery. And so my sister and I would hang out at her house and do a lot of that stuff, which kind of introduced me to more kinds of art things. So when I got into school, I kind of just took to art class pretty easily. And then I didn't really take it seriously until I got to college. I ended up going to community college because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And when I took my first art class, and I met a friend of mine that was doing things that I thought weren't really something that I could do, because I kind of viewed artists, like comic artists and the people that I looked up to in the art world, as like, oh, they have talent that I don't have. But when I actually met somebody in real life that was doing things closer to what I wanted to do, I was like, oh, maybe this is like, maybe real people do this. And that kind of set me on this journey to start pursuing my own art career.
I think that's something that's really common, where the general public does not believe that they have the skill set that the game developers or the artists out there that they look up to have. And maybe those, like the writers or whatever that they like reading the books for, those people have some transcendent skill set that they cannot achieve.
Not 100%.
Yeah, I used to have that mentality. Like for the greater portion of my tattooing career, when I was just doing tattoos, I would look at, Magic the Gathering cards and those types of, illustrations, and I would just, I'd be like amazed and impressed. But it never occurred to me that like maybe I could do that too someday. But it's interesting to me to hear you talk about like all of the sort of like hands-on fabrication experience that you have, or in your early developmental years, the sort of like structural, what's the term that I'm looking for, like where like types of art that would fall into the category of building something, like making three-dimensional, yeah, or sculptural, and constructive, yeah, because it makes so much sense now when I look at your art and I see like how great an understanding you have of three-dimensional forms and figures and perspective and stuff like that. And I would suspect that there's a direct line from like those early formative years of lots of like hands-on experience to being able to like mentally conceptualize like the turning of three-dimensional forms in space and stuff. It makes me want to recommend pottery to everybody now.
Well, also when I was younger, like I grew up around a lot of farm equipment and stuff, and I remember being like so fascinated with like all the little machines and stuff, all the little mechanisms, I should say, inside of those machines, that I used to look at that stuff like for as long as I possibly could until my parents pulled me away, basically.
So was it just like right into comics, or did you go to art school, or are you largely like self-guided in your evolution as an artist?
So I ended up going to a small school here in Connecticut called Lime Academy College of Fine Art. It doesn't exist anymore, but at the time it was very traditional. And when I say traditional, I mean like Renaissance style traditional. So like a lot of figure studies, a lot of still lives, that kind of stuff. But when I went there, I saw them doing things like écorché sculptures, which for anyone that doesn't know is like the sculptures that you see that have like their skin flayed off and it's just like all the muscles to like study how anatomy works and all that. And when I saw that stuff and I saw the art that was coming out of there that was like really strong fundamentally, a lot stronger than anything that I had seen at any other school that I had visited, I was like, this is the place that I need to go to like get the foundation that I need to do whatever I want. So that's where I ended up going for 3 years after community college, once I figured out that that's what I wanted to do.
Did you know about drawbox.com at the time?
I did not. That was back kind of before the internet was like a big learning tool. So you pretty much could only go to school or go to the library, I guess, back then.
So what was your path outside of art school? What's the TLDR from art school to your professional career? Not necessarily to where you are now, but at least the initial beginnings of your professional career.
So the TLDR is I'm stubborn, and like as soon as I got out of art school, I quit my part-time job at the local grocery store, and I was like, that's it. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to either, make no money and die, or I'm going to make it on my art. And I don't know that I recommend that to anybody, but that's what I did. And I had a support structure back then that I could afford to do something like that. But yeah, that's the short version.
Yeah, I mean, if it's good enough for Van Gogh, it's good enough for you, right? No money, die.
That's right. Perfect.
How long have you been doing this as your career?
About 10 years now, since 2011.
Who have been the really big mentors and inspirations along the way for you?
So I had an instructor at Lime Academy, David Wenzel, who did the Hobbit graphic novel, is probably what he's most famous for. But so in that school environment where everybody's doing like that kind of Renaissance-y kind of stuff, I kind of didn't really fit in, but at that time they were bringing in an illustration degree, and he was like the first illustration instructor to come in there. And so we got fairly close during that because we could kind of commiserate in the not really fitting in. And he helped me a lot like early on. And I still run into him at like when cons are happening. I run into him at the local conventions and stuff, and it's good to catch up, and like I'll hang out at his table and help him out. And he gives me advice whenever I hit him up for it. But other than that, I'd say not really a mentor, but like I've always had this friendly rivalry with my friend Leonardo Gonzalez, who is my friend that I talked about earlier that I met at community college. He goes by Lagonzart on Instagram and wherever else you could find him. He does like monster stuff. And we've always had like this friendly rivalry where we always like used to collaborate when we were going to school together, and then we went to separate schools, but we always kept in touch, and we're always like sharing art with each other and like learning from one another. And I really recommend people having like some kind of rivalry whenever you're trying to learn something. It's probably like the best thing for motivation, but not to let it go into like
unfriendly territory.
Unfriendly, exactly.
Yeah. That's similar advice to what Evan Mel Amundsen suggests, because he had an art rival in high school. He and Jesper, not Jesper Eising, but a different Jesper. And they kept pushing each other and be like, hey, this is how you do this in this perspective. Oh, I get it now. So they kept forcing each other to learn just so they could one-up each other. So, yeah. Peers are great, whether it's a rival or just a critique.
And I think that's the best thing about Twitch, honestly. Like, it's very easy to find other people that are kind of around your same level and then like bouncing ideas off of them and learning from each other.
Yeah, definitely. Liad in the chat is jumping right in with a question that is a little bit ahead of the game, but we can ask it now. You had mentioned conventions, and he was curious what type of conventions you've gone to in the past, and are there illustration-specific conventions?
So I've only been to a few. I've been to there's one in Connecticut called Terrificon that happened at a casino every year that I used to go to pretty much every year for the past like 3 or 4 years. But I had just recently like gotten into the like going to conventions and stuff like that. I know that to answer the illustration specific convention question, I know there's a LuxCon. I think that's in like Pennsylvania, if I remember correctly. But I'm not very knowledgeable on that.
It's in the middle of rural Pennsylvania, so between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. But yeah, there are many conventions that will allow illustrators to be there, that illustrators could do well with. Like Dragon Con, that comes to mind. There are some other ones I can't remember off the top of my head because I don't really think about conventions very often. And luckily, it's going to be a little while before our conventions come back, so we can hunt those down a little bit later.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially recently.
Well, going back to your professional life, where are you now? Like, what is your main thrust now? I know that you do some comics. We've touched a little bit on that. I'd love to hear you expand more on that and sort of like what else you've drawn in to round out the package.
So like I started out just like everybody else, where you just take whatever you can get, and then you slowly like figure out what it is that you actually like doing. And I always like telling stories, but that kind of forks in the illustration world a little bit, especially these days, where it's like comics are one way to go for like storytelling, but now there's also like tabletop RPG stuff, and I have a hard time deciding which way I want to go on that one. So I'm doing a little bit of both, as is apparent in my Kickstarter, but I'm still doing like comic commissions and stuff like that. And I do a lot of character commissions for tabletop RPGs because it aligns pretty well with the storytelling aspect as well.
Do you feel like that makes it more difficult? Like, are there pros and cons to having that tension between the two? Like, do you ever think, man, this would be so much easier if I could just pick one and just focus everything
all the
into
time. All the time. But I figure, like, most decisions that we make, the grass is always greener, right? And, like, I will probably eventually pick one to be predominant, and then the other one will be, like, secondary. But right now, I'm kind of letting them go their own directions and then see which one works out better, and then maybe I'll shift over to that.
My understanding was that comics do pay a lot less than tabletop RPG stuff, and tabletop RPG stuff is already known for paying poorly.
I wouldn't say that they pay worse. I would say that tabletop RPG stuff pays worse on the whole than comics, at least in my experience. But that doesn't mean that it's true for the whole market, if that makes any sense.
Well, the weird thing, we were talking about this last week, the weird thing about the tabletop industry is that the companies will pay half, 1/10 as much as a private client. So it's hard to talk about prices comparatively. We were talking about industry prices of tabletop RPG or private clients of tabletop RPG or comics, which I imagine is mostly professional stuff that pays.
Most of mine have been independents. So that's another thing where it's like kind of hard to compare because maybe I got good clients, other people have less financially stable clients. I'm not sure.
Do you plan on staying more in the independent, as far as comics are concerned, do you plan on staying more in the independent world, or do you have aspirations of, well, I don't know what the right way to put that is, because I don't want to say, like,
no, I know what you mean.
Higher, and I don't want to, belittle anybody's efforts at all, but there's certainly there's the the typical names that is like held in, like, oh my god, this is the gods of comics or whatever.
So I thought that I would want to work for like a bigger publisher, but I got the opportunity to do a test script for Marvel a couple years ago, and that whole process was not something that I enjoyed. So that kind of cured me of that a little bit. And I would probably try working for other publishers, but right now I'm not having trouble finding clients that are willing to pay my rates. So I haven't really thought to branch out yet.
That sounds like it's time to raise your rates then.
Agreed.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about this before the podcast started recording, and rates and finding your way in rates. And obviously you can be as vague or as specific as you want, but I guess I would sort of skirt the topic by asking, how do you determine what a fair asking rate is for comics? In the freelance illustration, in the commission world, it is notorious for undercharging, people just racing to the bottom. You find something similar in like the independent comic world, or is it there like more of an understanding of what's going to be expected on the part of the publisher to pay?
So that's a little bit difficult for me to answer, only because I'm part of like a network of independent comic artists. So like we all talk about our prices pretty freely. So it's, and we've already been through the like building up to like where we are now. So like we got all of the underselling ourselves. Well, I mean, we're artists, so we probably always undersell ourselves to some extent. But yeah, I lost my train of thought on that one. But
well, you were saying that you're sort of in this network, so you've already kind of like worked through the pitfalls of undercharging. So you were saying it's a little harder for you to answer the question of, what's a fair rate, or avoiding unfair rates.
Yeah. So like, I guess what I wanted to touch on was just like, it's always difficult to figure out what your rate is for any freelance art or freelance anything, I would assume. And I think it's just like figuring out the time invested in the comic page that you're going to do, and then figuring out a price per page, and then extrapolating that out to whatever the project size is. So like comics are normally charged by page rate, if people weren't aware of that. And just figuring out your speed is basically how you figure out your price. Like most comic artists can do like 1 to 2 pages a day for inks. Some are faster, some are slower, but their page rates, I assume, would reflect that.
That's a page a day, pencils and inks?
These days, if they're doing it digitally, yes. Because
really
you don't really have to do like a lot of penciling if you're going to be doing your own inking digitally. And like digital inks, like you can just erase them anyway. So it's basically fair. Penciling, inking at the same time. Whereas my good friend Walter Ostley says pensinkling.
Yeah, inkling doesn't have the same. No. Anyway, well, what is a fair rate? Like if you were new to this and you didn't have the network that you're already in, and you were searching around for information, what would you tell somebody in that position to look for as far as, a fair going rate?
I would say it's that one's really hard it's hard to tell anybody what their rate should be, right? But
I guess we often tell people like don't charge yourself less than minimum wage.
Yeah, that was basically going to be my advice. Okay. Was like figure out minimum wage, what your minimum wage is, because you might live in some other part of the country or some other part of the world, and then figure out how long it takes and do the math. And that's what I would charge if I was going into this. Though people in other parts of the world I think you should just use the American number, honestly, because like just
the client
set the bar there. Yeah,
the client doesn't know, so that's fine.
Exactly.
Well, and I mean, probably most publishing is going to be done within the Western world, so it's like get that Western money. Don't undercharge yourself because you live in Sri Lanka. If your publisher is in LA, charge LA prices. That seems reasonable, right?
Right. That does make sense. And yeah, it always kills me when I see people charging like way less because they can, basically. I mean, we've all talked about this. I'm sure it's come up many times in this podcast.
Yes.
It's always worth bringing up again. I can't speak for Moose. It never gets old for me to talk about again.
But we brought you up here to talk about your latest Kickstarter. Had you done any Kickstarters prior to this one?
Yeah, I did. I did a Kickstarter for a coloring book based on my Mechadoodle series. That was like 2 years ago. It's called the Techno Necronomicon. And yeah, was there any other part of the question?
No. So what did you learn from doing the first one that was like a hard knocks, you had to have learned the hard way type of thing?
I think I'm trying to think of like stuff that I learned that applied to this one, because it was a little bit different, right? Because I was providing a physical copy of something, and it was a coloring book, so like not related at all to tabletop RPGs. But I think the biggest thing is probably something that is probably one of the first things that you learn when researching Kickstarters is like your first day is like really important. So you want to make sure that you like build up to that first day with all of your advertising and all of your like getting the word out about your project, and make sure that everybody knows that you're going to be starting on, when it comes out, and for everybody to get on board as soon as possible to make sure that your project gets seen by as many people as possible on Kickstarter.
Did doing a physical goods Kickstarter the first time around make you want to err towards offering a digital one this time around?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said that it didn't, because it simplifies the process a lot by keeping it digital. And also, I feel really bad about not offering the product to people that are outside of the United States, but the whole shipping aspect of Kickstarters is like such a nightmare that I don't even know if I want to get involved with that. But so that was another part of it, is like trying to make sure that it's universally available.
Liad has another good question from chat. Why did you choose Kickstarter over Indiegogo? Did you look into alternatives to Kickstarter first?
I looked into it, and it seemed like Kickstarter had the biggest audience, from what I could tell, for tabletop RPG stuff. And so if that's where people go to find the stuff that you're selling, you should probably be looking there.
Have you done any other merch sales, or was the coloring book the first thing?
The coloring book was the first thing, and I kind of used it as like a way to kind of pay for some overhead, and so that I could start doing conventions. Unfortunately, right when that happened is when this all hit. It's a story that we've all heard a million times. But I have t-shirts that you buy from like Threadless and TeePublic. I haven't really pushed them very much because I just am terrible with social media. But they're out there. So if you like the whole Mechadoodle stuff, you can find all that stuff either through my Twitch page or my Linktree, or there'll probably be a link down below.
I hear that Amazon's merch is the smoothest sailing after you get in. Like, it's hard to get in, but after you do get in, it tends to pay the bills a little bit more.
I haven't looked into that, but I guess I should check that out. So thanks for the tip.
Yep. I think I've mentioned that a few times in this podcast, but it's just hard to it's hard to get in. So there are videos on YouTube of like how to get in. That's the type of, yeah.
Is it different than the Amazon affiliate program, or is it connected?
The affiliate program is just basically you post a link and then they give you a cut of that sale. With merch, they actually put it on the website on Amazon's website for you. And then, so instead of selling on tpublic.com or redbubble.com or anything else I can't pronounce right now, .com, it's amazon.com. And there's a specific way to that it's viewed on their website. It's shown in the same search results as everything else, but it has a different icon. So after you're in, you can recognize what your peers are. But before then, to you, me, or anyone, it's going to look like just another item on the Amazon store page.
And that's print on demand kind of stuff?
Yep. You don't touch anything other than the check they send you.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, some people are getting hyped on that in chat. So we'll have to do a future episode on the Amazon how-to. But coming back to Kickstarter for you, Ethan, what was your lead up to this one? Since you've already done one before, did you feel like you kind of had it all worked out, like what your game plan would be, or did you do any sort of preliminary legwork to get ready for this one, since you were making a slightly different kind of product?
So I felt like I kind of had an idea of what was going to happen once the Kickstarter launched, and I had an idea like that I wanted to talk about it publicly, like before it happened, to kind of like ramp up to the launch. But before I even did any of that, I had to make the thing that I was going to kickstart. So like there was a long period of like development, and then I had to start making art, and then I was sharing the art, but I kind of realized that like I was sharing it too early, because like I was sharing it like 4 months before I was going to launch. And at that point, people are like, okay, yeah, I'll just file that away in the back of my mind, and then they'll just forget it. And then by the time that you're actually launching, they'll be like, oh yeah, that art stuff, I already checked it out, but they didn't. So like next time I'll probably save I'll build up art and then start posting like a couple weeks in advance, and then launch that way.
How early in advance can you set up the Kickstarter page so that you can send people to what's the term for it when they want to say they want to do it in advance?
I think that I don't know that there is a limit. I didn't really look into it because of the way that I ended up going about launching. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to set that up beforehand, so you know if there's interest before you even launch.
Right. So like even if you're promoting for it once in advance, you can at least have a link to the Kickstarter thing then, and have them start with whatever the pre-pledge stuff is. I forget what the term for it is.
I think they can just follow it right
Follow,
now.
that's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, from my experience, you can set up that landing page, the initial Kickstarter landing page for your project, pretty much like whenever. Yeah, and then like you were saying, you use that link in all of your promotional material, and people just like follow it for when it actually goes live.
So, is there any downside to doing it way too early? Like, let's say you have this idea that you want to do a Kickstarter, you don't have it ready yet. Like, you don't have all the drawings done. Is there a downside to starting to send people to that page in advance?
I wouldn't imagine so. As long as you have something to show so that it looks like a finished page. Like, you wouldn't want to send somebody to a thing that has like some just, fill in image or like a really quick thing that you did. But yeah, that sounds like something that you'd probably want to do early.
Yeah, as long as it's like a fully conceived idea, and it's like it's a thing, and you're going to be able to, fill promotional material with content from the coming Kickstarter between the time that you put that page up and when you're, otherwise it's what Ethan just said, people are just gonna file, they'll see it, they'll look at it, maybe they'll even follow, and then they'll forget about it. So even when the going live thing comes up, it might have like gone so far down their list of priorities that, but if you can keep pushing up the hype on it with like awesome material, then that's awesome. So what was your hype train like? Like, what kind of things were you doing to get the ball rolling?
So I initially was thinking that I was gonna bring on more people that have already done tabletop RPG stuff to work on the project with me. But then I realized when I was doing that due to the nature of the thing that I was building, I didn't really have room to bring people in as much as I thought I did. So I didn't end up going with that as a way to like get the net wider. But the way that I tried to promote it was just becoming a lot more active on Twitter, because on like Instagram, for example, there's no offsite interaction that I've found really. So like I kind of ignored Instagram and I just promoted on like posting in Discords, posting on Reddit, posting like the art that is, and on Twitter, and trying to become more active within the tabletop communities on Reddit, or I mean on Reddit and also on Twitter, to try to start getting the word out.
Yeah, your success story is encouraging, because it shows that you don't have to have like the tens of thousands of followers on Instagram or Twitter or whatever to make it work. Like you and I are in the same pool of artists that are sort of like in that lower mid-range of artists on social media, and it's like, yeah, we got a fair amount of following, but it's not necessarily the biggest, but you can still make that work for you. And I guess maybe even the argument could be made that might be, well, I don't know if it's better to have a smaller following in this regard, but the people that are following you are definitely going to be like really into your stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that doing this Kickstarter actually built my following on Twitter quite a bit, actually. So it kind of goes back and forth in that regard, too.
Did you ever feel bad about tweeting so much?
Yes. That's something like with social media, like in my normal day-to-day life, I talk as little as possible and like keep to myself. So like the idea of going on social media all the time and like it feels like that I'm pestering people, even though we all know that on social media it feels like that you're just yelling into the darkness. But it's like totally opposite my nature. Hell, just like talking this much in front of people is totally against my nature. But something that every freelance artist needs to do, just kind of get out there.
Well, Twitter seems a bit more friendly to that.
Yeah, definitely.
Well. Like the multiple postings a day and at different times of day too. I have nothing to back this up, so this could just be strictly incorrect intuition, but
I mean, that's how I'm talking this whole thing, you know?
It strikes me that, or I should say, at least I haven't noticed any, negative drawbacks to multiple postings or posting at lots of different times of day, because I've only noticed my engagement go up just from doing that, so it's like if you post in the morning and you post in the afternoon and you post in the evening, the algorithm isn't smashing you for that, and then you're hitting lots of different time zones and areas in the world and different following groups, and even retweeting your posts from like earlier in the day so that new people will see it, and the old people probably won't even see it anymore unless they're only following like 50 people. It's like, cool, great, go for it.
Yeah, I think because of the nature of Twitter, how like you just look at your feed and it's just like a bunch of stuff. It's so easy to miss things that like on the days that I was most active, I was posting like once every hour and a half. I would be posting about it, and I would still be getting like new interactions because, like, I don't know about you guys, but when I go onto Twitter, I see maybe 50 posts, maybe. Like, that's if I'm really trying to go for it. But other than that, like, I'm not really seeing that much, and
Right.
50 isn't that many.
The weird thing is, like, on Twitter, I will follow, I follow like 2,000 people. So even when there's somebody who I interact with every time I see one of their posts, there'll be some days where I'll see them retweet one of their prior tweets or reply to a prior tweet. Like, I didn't see this at all that day. But then maybe I only went on that Twitter twice that day, so I missed that post. So you're just always trying to hit a bunch of moving targets, and you never know which ones you're going to hit when you start throwing this stuff out there.
And I think that's really kind of encouraging, at least for me, as somebody who feels like that they're being annoying. It's kind of like a validation that you're not being annoying, that you're actually not even you're not even yelling at the people that you think that you're yelling at. You're just kind of like, hey, even though it feels like you're constantly like, hey, look at my stuff. Hey, look at my stuff. Hey, look at my stuff. To them, it's just like they saw one out of your 20 tweets.
Right. Funny enough, the Twitter algorithm also changed in the middle of your Kickstarter. Did you notice that?
I did notice that. I wasn't really sure what changed exactly, but I definitely noticed a change because it seemed like I was getting a fair amount of interaction at the early part between Twitter and my Kickstarter, and then I'd say like a week through, it seemed to fall out. I don't really know when that change dropped, but
were you always starting with an image for your posts?
Yeah,
that's the thing that changed. It went from being an image-focused algorithm to, if you post an image, they're going to prioritize that into your feed, to a text-focused algorithm. So now when I load up Twitter, the first page of tweets are all just text. The first day or two that happened, I thought, am I in a thread right now? Did I click into a tweet thread by mistake? Because it's all text. But no, it's just a bunch of different individual tweets that are all text. So they're trying to prioritize discussion now instead of just look at this image, like this image, slide. That's it. Right.
That's interesting. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I look at my Twitter feed and it's all a bunch of text, it kind of just feels like a wall of text that's like impenetrable.
Yeah, I don't know why they would want to do that. Like, what would the rationale be there?
I mean, maybe just because we're visual people. That's how we think, but maybe other people interact more.
I thought the whole internet, wall of text is, a cliche meme for a reason. Like, don't do that to me. Don't wall of text me,
true.
Bro.
Very true.
But you didn't catch on to that during the Kickstarter to take advantage of it, though. You didn't know to
no,
start
but
with text.
I did try a bunch of different styles of posts, but I didn't notice that pattern emerge for my stuff. And I don't know, maybe all the people that I follow weren't doing a lot of text-based posting, so that didn't happen. Because when I opened Twitter today, I saw a bunch of images and stuff. So I don't know.
Interesting. Maybe they're changing it out for different people and they're testing which one works better. That's A/B testing. It's what the industry does.
Could be.
So I had a question for you that it more calls back to the Kickstarter that you had done before, and I just remembered I never responded to your survey for the coloring book, so I still haven't got that coloring book. Anyway, gonna do that as soon as
yeah, you should hit me up after this thing.
I'm so glad we did this so I could remember that. Anyway, so yeah, this goes back to that Kickstarter where you were actually making a physical product that you were going to have to mail. And you mentioned it, you touched on it a little bit before, where you're just like, I don't want to deal with shipping anymore. But I want to bring it up just because we're talking about Kickstarter. It is a thing. Not everybody's going to do a digital product. So while we can, let's talk a little bit about generally your challenging experiences. I would like to hear generally about like any sort of wrinkles that you had to figure out how to iron out, and in particular this shipping thing. What's going on there?
So luckily, I got very lucky in that I didn't really have any wrinkles with my first Kickstarter, because I had already known a bunch of people that had just done Kickstarters. So they kind of like preempted me with any sort of issues. And also some of my friends just are very experienced with like mailing a bunch of stuff. So that was handled pretty easily. But the tricky part about shipping with Kickstarter is that the shipping cost that you charge factors into the funding goal. So like if you had a goal for $200, right, and your product costs $10, but for some reason you're shipping this thing to Mars or whatever, and it costs $200, the first person from Mars who orders it pays $10, and then $200 for shipping, and now you're over your funding goal, and you're only making $10 minus whatever Kickstarter is taking out of it, minus whatever you paid to make it. So like international shipping is crazy expensive. Like I use that $200 figure because it's kind of ridiculous, but seriously, when I was doing my coloring book, I knew somebody in Canada who was like, hey, I want to back your Kickstarter, but obviously I can't because you have it turned, international shipping turned off. And I was like, well, like I know you, so like I'll look into the shipping, and then we can just like, you can just pay me and I'll mail it to you. And I looked into it, and it was $25 to ship my coloring book to Canada. And I was like, I don't know how I factor that in.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to cut you off if you still had more.
No, that's pretty much it.
I just recently wrapped up a Kickstarter too, and in work trying to figure everything out, the shipping thing in particular was so baffling. And I was asking around, I was asking people, what's up with this shipping? Because they have the little spreadsheet thing that they want you to fill out to estimate your funding goal, and shipping is a line item in that spreadsheet. But I was under the impression that they would charge the person making the pledge for the shipping when they made the pledge. So I couldn't understand like why there was this line item for it in the spreadsheet estimation, but they're going to be charging people for it. And it's not until afterwards that I'm like, oh, like you just said, it gets factored. But why do they do that? I don't understand why they do that.
I can't tell you. I haven't heard anybody tell me. Like I've asked around, I've looked for it. I don't know why they would I can't. Maybe they don't want to be liable for people not paying for the shipping. I have no idea.
Well, it just seems easy. It's like there's the pledge, and then there's the shipping.
I imagine it's so they can get a cut of the shipping, and so 5% of that doesn't sound like very much from one person, but when you add it up through across all Kickstarters ever, that 5% of the shipping going to Kickstarter.
You smart moves.
That kind of sounds fucked up, though. Like
it's a little bit like the Superman scheme or Office Space.
What is that? Where
they round off fractions of a cent from every transaction, and then they ended up with millions of dollars.
It seems shady, though. Like that doesn't
For sure.
it doesn't seem like shipping should have a right to the shipping costs.
Until there's a competitor that overwhelms them. Like if Indiegogo doesn't, and Indiegogo becomes the success story of Kickstarter, of crowdfunding, then Kickstarter can keep doing it.
Yeah, so Indiegogo, if you're listening, like I know you are, offer me separate shipping from the funding goal, and I'll be there for whenever I do physical copies of things.
So do you think that you'll just never do a physical copy of something again?
No, I will. Just if I do, it'll probably only be within the continental United States, unless I get to a point where I'm willing to take on that risk of like maybe all of my backers will come from India or something, and I have to ship it, and it's going to cost me $1 million to ship things. But yeah.
So on the practical side of things, you wanted to have it's beneficial to have a nice page on your Kickstarter. Like, how much time did you put into working on this landing page?
Making all those graphics and things, I would say like in total, probably like a week of time. So like probably over 40 hours, like creating I had a stretch goal thing. I had a rewards graphic. I had my bio graphic. I had like the title page thing. I don't remember what they call it. The header, the Kickstarter header. And plus I changed it like halfway through. Yeah, I would say that I spent like probably a good week of my time doing that.
And that's some weird thing that you don't really consider about, right? When you're putting in the price of the Kickstarter, right? Like, it'll take me a week to do, but if your goal is only $100 for the Kickstarter and you make $100, and you're like, well, I spent a week and I made $100.
Yeah, and I was able to recycle some of my other art to like use for that stuff, but some people don't have that option. Granted, some other people probably have less time consuming options than to like do these little machine things everywhere, but it's kind of my brand, so I had to go with it.
That is also a line item in the spreadsheet when they're asking you to estimate your funding goal. They suggest that you make an estimate for like administrative costs, research, development, like all of those things. But that's another thing that's a little bit brow wrinkling for me when I'm looking at it, because it's like, I don't know, like how, like until you've actually like done all of that. Well, or I guess maybe if you have a lot of experience with Kickstarters in the past, maybe it would be easier for you to do that. But yeah, go ahead.
There's nothing stopping you from creating your whole Kickstarter page before you figure out your budget, right? So,
well, yeah, that's true. Okay, yeah, but
that's how I would do it.
Was there anything else that was a considerable time sink or investment before launching the Kickstarter?
Almost forgot push to talk. The biggest time sink was just, like making the product really, and then like the art. But no, I can't really think of. Oh, you know what? I made like a little video, and like learning the video software. Like I've done some video editing stuff, but like learning little things about video editing took me a lot longer than anticipated, for sure.
And there are people out there who do video editing for stuff like this, and it may be $100, but if it's $100 instead of a week of your time, it's probably worth it.
Yeah, I almost did hire somebody to do that, but at the same time, I was like, I'm going to be doing more of this stuff, so I just need to like learn it, and it was fun for me, honestly, to like try and figure out how to do it. So, yeah.
So you finished the product before you even launched. You did the launch page and all that stuff before you launched. You did a lot of marketing before you launched. How much time would you estimate in total you had spent before you even clicked the go live button?
Months of time. So, yeah, like probably 4 months of time.
So we're talking like 400 hours. Is that appropriate? Or
yeah, probably more than that. Because I made all the stuff. I tested it. I like made a whole playtest server on Discord. I got a bunch of people in, and I ran a bunch of games and stuff, plus all the art that I did, plus doing all the research of like looking into other Kickstarters that did similar things, what they did, what they didn't do, did it affect things, how did they go about finding their consumer base and all that stuff.
Were you doing other projects while you were working on this, like doing other things to make it money?
I was doing smaller commissions in between, like in my free time, whenever I would get to the point where it's like, all right, I can't even look at Kickstarter right now. Like I can't even look at it. All right, I'll just do this commission of this orc or whatever. And so, but luckily I was in a position to do something like that, and there was no deadline for any of those things.
Right. So just to be clear, everything was done prior to the launch. So it's more of a kick finisher than a kick launcher or Kickstarter.
It was like 90% of the way there. So yeah, I mean, that's how Kickstarter works, unfortunately, these days. It's like you got to be pretty much done with whatever you're going to be launching. Otherwise, you kind of run the risk of having issues, and you want to have like as much stuff as possible to like show your backers so that they are going to want to get in on it, you know? And like hiding anything or like not having things done and not being able to show it is just lost marketing assets, basically.
So you're still going to maybe disappoint them when they get the book and all the assets they've already seen?
I didn't show them the rules or anything like that. Like I showed them some rule stuff, but I didn't show them everything. Like I showed them most of the art, but not all of it. So I tried to keep some things, but not a lot, because in reality, like it's not like they're going to pay you less because you didn't have a big reveal when they got the PDF, right? They want to know what they're paying for, and that's what they're paying for. So, yeah.
So with all of this in mind, you know, what your product's going to be, how much work you're going to put into it, what you want to get out of it, how did you decide what your funding goal should be?
So I tried to factor in like my time spent on the art and all that, the art, the play test, the research. Well, less the research, because I kind of figured that I would recoup that over the course of like all the Kickstarters that I will ever run, you know? So like that was less of a factor. So art, play test, the writing, advertising, and I had a consultant for this project as well. So I also factored that into the ending goal. There's also a weird thing that happens with the funding goal where, like, if you get funded faster, then Kickstarter will promote your project. So I ended up cutting back my funding goal and just like crossing my fingers, basically, that I would get to the point that I wanted to get to.
I was going to say, because for 400 hours, the initial goal was less than 2,000. So you had seriously docked that.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually reached the funding goal that I originally had put down as like, this is what I actually want to make. And I basically just squeaked across the line with that, which I think is in part because I set my funding goal lower, which is counterintuitive and I don't really like, but
yeah. So the lesson is that you should have set the target goal at $100. So then you could have hit that within 30 minutes or 10 minutes. And then it would have, started flooding you with views sooner.
Maybe. I don't know if there's diminishing returns on that. I'd actually be really curious to run that experiment on Kickstarter to see if that actually affects the algorithm at all.
Yeah, I think we talked about this earlier with Gavin and Blake. I almost said Blavin, and that would have been really embarrassing.
And Gake.
But we mentioned that they could set the goal artificially really low, and then if it didn't reach the amount that you thought that it should hit, then you could cancel the Kickstarter. But that might only work once. If you keep doing that, the people that follow you might sense a pattern and think that you're up to some cheesy stuff and decide not to back your next project. So it is a tactic, but it would only work once.
Yeah, and I was, I actually considered like that kind of tactic, but I was just really worried that it would turn against me. Because just inconveniencing people that they have to re-back the project, like that would frustrate me maybe enough to not back it the second time. So that was my thought process on that.
There was another Kickstarter that happened after yours, and I think it was called like Bloodstone or something. It had this amazing trailer, well animated. It was a board game with miniatures and everything. It had a goal of like $50,000, and it hit that.
And it's gone.
And the Kickstarter mafia sweeps in and boots Moose into the ether.
They used that 50 grand to come into this call right now and boot Moose out.
I told secrets that shouldn't have been told. It was a Bloodstone thing, but no. They canceled the product. They canceled it after they hit the funding goal because it wasn't going high enough. So there was some hubbub about that on Twitter. But since it was a small enough project, they got away with it because it wasn't Blizzard, right?
It's a weird thing. Like, should you be penalized for playing the game that Kickstarter set up? I don't know.
It's one of those things.
If you set up perverse incentives, people are going to take advantage of it, and not even like bad people. Like, I mean, like you're a cool dude. I know you, and even you're like, I thought about using that tactic. The minute that you're talking about like tactics, then you're automatically in this like weird cynical kind of world, and it's like, well, you gotta like hold on to your soul, your artistic soul. But I wanted to know about this consulting. You hired a consultant. What did that entail?
Yeah, so initially when I was thinking that I wanted to bring in more people into the project, well, first of all, you guys had dropped the die on one of your earliest episodes, and that's actually what sparked me to make this project. So I reached out to him for like if he could give any thoughts, and I got I did a consult with him like real quick for like an hour or something, just to like pick his brain on everything that was on the show, but like in more detail, more pertinent to my project. And then he introduced me to a community of other people that are like looking for work within the tabletop community space. And so when I went there, that's when I started looking for people to collaborate with on this project that I didn't end up going with, but I'll probably go with on future projects. And one of the people that I hired to do like this short narrative that I'll probably end up using in my next Kickstarter that I do, he had done a project that was very successful on Kickstarter. So I was picking his brain about like what he could do. And then he said, like I had never run a tabletop RPG thing before, but I contacted this consultant and they helped me put this all together, and it, blew up. So I was like, all right, well, get me their name and I'll have an interview. And it's the guys over at Terrific Tabletop is who I used. Tabletop Terrors. Wow. Tabletop Terrors. I don't know how I got that backwards right there, but sorry, Tim. But yeah, they were super helpful with like just like the checklist beforehand to make sure that I was checking all the boxes for the tabletop community, Kickstarter community, before going, before launching. And also they helped me when I was unsure of like the wording on something, or it's like, should I be posting right now? Should I be doing an update right now? I don't want to like harass people. What have you guys experienced? So they were really helpful for that kind of stuff. And then like, I assume that it seems like they'll be helpful when I actually go around to fulfilling the project.
Can you give like a ballpark range of what people would expect if they wanted to go in that route for consulting?
Yeah, it's for them. They just took like a very small percentage that I found acceptable. I don't really want to speak numbers because, that's their prerogative. But yeah, I found it very reasonable for even if all it was them just reassuring me that I was doing the right thing. You know what I mean? Because it can be hard to find somebody who you can just constantly be bouncing ideas off of, or like, it's like, is this actually a good idea? I don't even know. And when it's just you, it's so difficult to make that decision. And it's good to just have somebody that can be like, yes or no.
Did they help you with finding other people to work on the project with, or were you solo on this? Like as far as actually putting in like the layout and the text and all that stuff?
I was solo. I took on a layout artist to do like the initial pages, the preview pages, through Tabletop Terrors, but I ended up just learning InDesign afterwards because I figured I'm going to be doing more projects like this, and I have this thing when I'm like working with other people that like when I want to do like little tweaks, I'm not the kind of person that feels comfortable being like, could you just like change that red by like 3 hues? Because it's really bugging me. I always feel like a jerk, but I also wouldn't be able to live with myself if I put it out there and that red was not that 3 hues different. So, yeah. So I ended up learning InDesign, but I did hire somebody for those initial preview pages.
You also mentioned advertising. Did you do some, and where and how much did you spend on it?
So the first day I put like $50 into Facebook ads and got 0 return from it. So that kind of just cured me of ever wanting to do ads, at least with that project at that time. When I do another project, I'll probably try something else. But because that was such a fantastical flop, it just totally turned me off to the whole idea of like paying for social media ads or anything like that.
If Gavin were here, he'd say that it all depends on how you use the ad system. Like there's nuances to using it to target the ads to the right people. And if you don't do it the right way, then you get nothing out of it. So he has experience doing that from his marketing background. So he has no problem doing it himself. And he gets money out of his investments. Whereas you and most of us, we throw money into the wind and then Facebook says, thank you.
Exactly. And the thing that bothers me the most about it is they're like, oh yeah, 2,000 people saw your thing. It's like, oh really? Well, Kickstarter's telling me that nobody clicked into the Kickstarter, or like backed the Kickstarter from there. So like that kind of just makes me feel like crap a little bit. But at the same time, like just because I saw it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, my Nana saw it. What does that mean?
That's an interesting point to highlight as well for anybody that's going to be new going into a Kickstarter, is that you can monitor your
impressions.
No, your
analytics. But you can
Yeah.
you can monitor the analytics, is what you're saying. That you can tell where backers came from originally, like how they got to your Kickstarter.
Yeah, so like you have to do it manually, basically. Like you generate a specific URL for each thing that you want to track, and then you hand out that URL only on that platform. So like you'd have like a Facebook link, a Twitter link, Discord, Instagram, all that stuff, and then it'll tell you how many people backed it from that link. So it's not a perfect system, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, any analytics is good analytics.
Yeah, that was actually one thing that I learned from my first project. I didn't really take advantage of that. And at the end of the project, I was like, man, I really wish that I knew like where I should be marketing myself, and having those analytics would really help. So this time I was like on top of it, trying to make a code for every iteration of the things that I was doing.
Aside from the ads, was there anything you did to get the first day off on the right foot?
Not really, other than just like yelling it to everyone who would listen and just be like, go and back this thing. If you're interested, just go and back it. But my personality is very much the opposite of like being aggressive.
Book.
Yeah,
Buy
exactly.
My book.
I'm
Buy
the opposite
my
of
book.
that. I'm like somebody brings it up in my chat when I'm like streaming or something. I'm like, oh yeah, guys, if you want to do the thing, like go and check out my t-shirts or whatever it is. But I never think to do it myself, and I feel very uncomfortable doing it. So
did you explicitly reach out to friends and family and say, hey guys, on this date I'm going to be doing the thing, and please back it then, and I'll pay you back if during Christmas if it gets funded?
I didn't go that route. I did tell everybody, and I have no shame in saying that a sizable portion came from my mother that first day. So thanks, Mom. But I mean that's how you got to do it. It's just the people that you know who actually want your project or want you to succeed you want to have them back on their first day, and then that will get the algorithm on your side for at least that first day.
It's a lot like a Twitter post or a Reddit post or Facebook post or anything else, Instagram post, whatever. The earlier the interaction is, the more important it is to the algorithm, because the algorithm wants to say, this is important, this is not. This is going well, this is not going well, as soon as possible. So the bigger the impact early, the more interactions early, the bigger the impact they are.
100%.
So within the first 5 minutes, ideally. But first hour is okay too, I guess. But first hour is better than the first day.
Definitely, for sure. And like that'll be something that in the future it'll be easier to, like, the more projects that you have within the same vein, the easier that'll be, because you have people to call on to cycle through to the next one.
The people have already proven that they are willing to give you money for your product.
What Moose said it way better than me.
So now your Kickstarter is off and running. It's gone live. What is your day-to-day effort like? What is your game plan?
So the first day, I was on like all the social media that I had and just like constantly trying to like promote it, whether like posting about it, commenting about it, trying to find people who are looking for something like that. On Reddit, like cruising the subreddits, trying to find more subreddits to either post art to or start a discussion that is kind of in the area of like the problem that I'm solving or the thing that I'm trying to do. And that was super draining for somebody like me that doesn't socialize very much. It was rough. I would much rather just not talk to anybody and just be drawing.
Yeah, I call that social energy. I can deal with like the first half of the day, no problem. I'll be on different Twitch streams talking to the people. But by the end of the day, I'm just lurking in all the channels that I'm supporting. That's it. I'm clicking the treasure chest button to get extra channel points, and that's all. That's my interaction for those channels. Unfortunately, I just run out.
Yeah, normally I don't even have the energy to like hang out in Discord or in Twitch channels for very long. It's like 10 minutes, and then I'm like, all right, I'm lurking. I can't. I just don't have the energy.
Was there things that changed over the course of your Kickstarter? As far as what you were doing day to day, or were there things that you had initially started out doing as strategies and then fell off because they weren't going so well?
So, like I said, this is really like I said before, the Instagram, I kind of just like shoot away. And this is the project that kind of like solidified that for me. Because like, if I look at my analytics now, I have like 2 backers from my Instagram. And I know for a fact that those 2 backers, the only reason that they used that was because I was in a conversation with them on Instagram about it. Like something unrelated, actually. We were talking about things that were unrelated. And then it's like, oh yeah, I have a Kickstarter going right now. You can check it out. And they backed it through that. When like, I don't have a huge following there, but my buddy, Laganzart, has like 70,000 followers, and he did like this big promotional thing for me, which thank you, Leo. I really appreciate that. But I got no backers from it at all. 0. So, presumably 70 or not 70,000, but maybe like, 3,000-5,000 people saw it and nobody clicked on.
Was it a story or a post?
Both. He did like 4 or 5 story posts with the slide up thing to see more. And then he did a post on his feed with like 10 images on it and like tagged me, everything, and nothing.
So on an account of that size, a story will get between like 2,000 to 3,000 views, and a post will get somewhere between, it's going to be a large number, between 30,000 and 500,000 views. So it's a lot of people that are seeing it, and Instagram is an island that people do not get off of.
And before people come up with the solution that like it's not related. Like his stuff is very similar to what I do. Just he doesn't do the mechanical stuff as much. He does a lot of monster stuff. So like, but there's a lot of crossover there. I think I would assume that there'd be a lot of crossover. So, I mean, you can go and check it out yourself. But
No, I think it's very much Instagram Island. That's what it is. There's no people don't swipe up, and they don't click links that are in profiles. So the best you can do is have a relationship with them that makes them driven to leave the platform by typing a URL themselves, and that's very rare unless it's some artist like Jamila Kampf. I think she's the only one that has made success off Instagram that I can think of off the top of my head.
Or Dave Cave. When he was on, he seemed to have a lot of positive things to say about how Instagram worked for him. But I think that's, I mean, he's got like 150,000 followers, and I think that's the numbers that you push up into when you hit a threshold where, it's like if it's 1 in 100, that's not doing, anything for you if you only have 1,000 followers. But
right.
1 in 100 when you have 100,000, okay, now that's doing something.
Dave was also drawing attractive women fan art, which people are a lot more motivated to seek out and pay for.
I don't understand. Why is that? Anyway.
Good question.
The world will never know.
So what were the standout success? Like what were the things that stand out in your memory as far as like, oh, those are some winning moves?
So one of them I kind of stumbled into, which was I just randomly like put a tweet out on a Thursday night after midnight. I was like, hey, I'm looking for people that like, where do you get your homebrew D&D stuff? And then I woke up in the morning and there was like, I don't know, 70 alerts or something like that. And I was like, what happened? What did I do? And
you're canceled.
Yeah. What happened was I unknowingly stumbled into this tabletop community thing. I mean, it's in every community, but like the Follow Friday thing. And so like everyone was linking everyone. And so they like, I had a bunch of, that's how I got like into one of the circles of D&D tabletop RPG groups on Twitter. And so that led to, I don't know, maybe a dozen backers through that interaction. But it really showed me that like being interactive with the community on Twitter and like asking questions rather than just being like, here's my stuff, check it out.
Buy my book.
Yeah.
Buy my book.
Gets a lot more reaction than the buy my book thing.
Yeah, I think Brian mentioned it earlier. Brian Perry, the director of marketing for D&D, he said either be educational or be entertaining, and that's how you get people's attention. Buy my book is not either of those.
Agreed. Like for the most part, because I don't really have the energy to like constantly be thinking of like these questions to be asking the greater community. A lot of it was just like, here's my thing. I don't know. If you see it and you like it, check it out. But as much as I could muster the energy for, I would try and like ask questions and engage with, like go on other people's tweets and like engage with them, which I think led to more reach than I would have had.
Well, maybe this kind of ties into what our next question was, which was the observation that kind of like in the middle of your Kickstarter, you had an upswing in the funding per day.
That's per day.
and usually the Kickstarter graph is bowl-shaped, where it's like a big spike at the beginning, really flat in the middle, and then a spike at the end. Do you think it was that little Twitter engagement, or what happened there in the middle?
No, I think that was actually when I hit my funding goal. So I think what happened was that the Kickstarter algorithm like promoted me as like, hey, this just got funded, check it out. So also I think, I'm not exactly sure how this works, but I know that people get emails from Kickstarter if they're like super backers or whatever, and it'll be like, hey, these are projects that you might be interested in. So it might have come up there, but that was a very surreal experience to like be in the middle of the project where I was expecting a dip and then having like my second biggest day. I was like, is this like a trend that's going to continue? Because if so, that's going to be insane. But it kind of like went up, and then the rest of the project went higher than it. The average was higher than previous to that. So I was pretty happy about that.
Yeah, and there's a good tool for tracking this it's called kicktrack.com instead of kickstarter.com. And you can check this for any project. It doesn't have to be your own. You can check it for other people's projects. So I was tailing along with Ethan, and I was like, hey, this is going really well. Look at this day. This day is great, isn't it? What'd you do differently? And he's like, I did nothing different. It's just going well.
Yeah. Like maybe that was like, who knows? Maybe it was a perfect storm of like that tweet plus the funding goal. Honestly, it's been so long that I don't really remember what the time frame was there, but it was fairly close in that time frame that I was getting into that circle. So maybe it was both coming together at the same time. I'm not really sure.
How far into the campaign did your project get funded?
I think it was 16 days, 13 days, something like that.
Yeah, it was about halfway through.
Yeah.
So what did you do after that? Were you just like pushing for stretch goals, or what was your motivation after that? Like after I got all my money, what do I need to do now? So, well, I didn't view it as, hey, I got my money. It was, all right, we're locked in. Like we got the funding goal. I'm at least getting paid this much to do the work that I already did. Right. But that kind of reinvigorated me to like get back on social media and like start promoting again hardcore. And I just really like for the whole Kickstarter, I pretty much just focused on the art. Like I probably should have said this way earlier, but like that's like the biggest thing that everyone has always told me. And what I want to make sure that I tell anyone who's listening to this that wants to do a Kickstarter is like focus on the art, because the art's going to sell your project more than anything. Period. So I was just trying to crank out as much art as possible and like put it out there so that people would see it and then be like, oh, that's a thing that I like. Like I like the idea of these tribal people with cyber limbs. How do I make that happen for me? It's like, well, check out this link.
Were the stretch goals already completed? Like, were they like faux stretch goals? Like you had already drawn up this stuff, and that was just like something that you're pointing out that you've done?
In a way, they were faux stretch goals. They could have been like, if I didn't reach those stretch goals, I could have just made another project. Like I already had a lot of the rules for most of the stuff, but I didn't really have a lot of the art for the stretch goals. So like during the last few weeks is when I was making the art for the stretch goal material. But before then, they were kind of just like in the PDF because I had thought of them while I was making it. And it was kind of just like, all right, well, we'll leave this out so that when we get to the Kickstarter, if I want to do stretch goals, I can add them in afterwards. Because I think it feels like stretch goals incentivize people to back even after the funding goal, or back earlier than they would have otherwise.
It sounds a little bit sketchy, but it really isn't. It's not like it's a day one DLC that you're paying on top of a $60 game, right? You're paying for the book, and you're paying the same amount, but you're getting more just because more people are buying it. That's it.
Yeah, if anything, it's like it's worse for me, right, to be doing these stretch goals in some ways, because I'm adding more for the same price, whereas I could have just broken it into 2 Kickstarters or 3 actually, and who knows, maybe that would have been better. I don't know, but I was having fun, so that's what I did.
You get carried away. You're like, I can offer them something they want, and that feels good.
Yeah, and like reaching those stretch goals is kind of like a little, drop of dopamine to get you through the next thing for me as the creator. So I think it's useful on both ends for that.
So now we've sort of gone from beginning to middle, and we're closing on the end. What does the end of your Kickstarter consist of?
Well, at that point, I was running pretty low on social energy, as Moose was saying earlier. I was pretty well tapped out. Like, I'd say a week before the end of my Kickstarter, my brain just could not come up with like any new thing to do. But I just kept, posting on Twitter and trying to be engaged, trying to join like Discords to like get in touch with more people and like see what they're doing and that kind of stuff. But I didn't do anything that was especially successful that last week. I didn't feel like, yeah, I guess that's my answer to that. And
So-
it's probably not the answer you wanted, but it's the honest one.
It sounds like that's the normal uptick at the end of the campaign, where people see that the campaign is ending soon, so they have another category that they're searching and finding it there. So that's where the additional backers came from.
Yeah, luckily the algorithm did the work that I was too trained to do at the end there. Like, so yeah, it feels good to know that like when Kickstarter showed my project to people, they were actually interested, and like that there was that sharp uptick whenever they showed it to people. Though as a creator, it's a little frustrating because it's like what if they just promoted it the whole time? I don't know.
I felt the same way when I was working on the Instagram account, where whenever Instagram would expand the reach, the numbers of likes and all impressions and all interactions would go up dramatically. But whenever they cut down the reach, it went down. So I'm like, well, if you showed it to everybody on Instagram, just the same percent of people would like it. So just do that. Do that. They didn't do that.
But I guess I got to share the spotlight or something. I don't know. Something ridiculous.
Yeah. It's all about ratios, how many people viewed it to how many people clicked like on it or interacted with it in any way. And then they're like debating between 1/1000th or 1/1,000,000th of a percent difference between two different artists to see who they give the cookie to.
I would love to see like the analytics of like who viewed the Kickstarter and like what percentage backed it or like followed it or whatever. But as far as I know, there's no way to access that.
That's useful information. They can't give you that.
Yeah.
Well, the beginning, middle, end paradigm should be modified to include all of the post Kickstarter stuff, because the end of the campaign is not the end of your work. There's probably half again, at least as much work to do, getting everything wrapped up and like actually like finished to where you don't have to think about this Kickstarter campaign anymore. What's next for you? Like, what is left?
So luckily for me, like I said, I did like 90% of the work beforehand. And now for my Kickstarter, all the backers got into a beta test. So I made up like a nice PDF for all my backers to get all the rules and stuff. And I sent that out. And now, and that took me like a few days to do. So I'd say that's like the majority of my work that I have to do, that I had to do after the project. Now it's just getting the feedback from my backers that are doing the playtest, and then adjusting my rules because I want to make sure that I'm making a good product. And then once all that's together, then just adjusting the layout, adding all the art that I didn't add to the bare bones beta test PDF, and then sending it back out sometime. I'm planning on doing that sometime in the fall. I haven't got a solid date yet, but yeah, before late October, I'll be doing that.
So has all the feedback from the players been all the +1 items should now be +3 items?
Yeah, mostly they're all like, yeah, these should actually be +5, and they should all make enemies explode. I was like, maybe you're right.
That's an interesting part of the process that, as an outsider, I wouldn't have intuitively thought of that. That there's a playtesting phase for a product like this. Where you're making a D&D module. If you're sort of like in that space and you're kind of like used to making those types of products, or at least familiar with that world, is that something that is typically done, and you would just like already be aware of that being needed to be part of the process, or is that something that some people should maybe think about?
I looked through a lot of Kickstarters, and it didn't seem like a lot of others were doing these kinds of playtests afterwards. It seemed like they might have done the playtest beforehand, and which I did. I did an alpha playtest with like 30-ish players over the course of like a bunch of sessions that I ran. But I don't know. It's really, you know me, I like collaboration. I'm a big collaboration fan. So like, this is kind of a way of me collaborating with all of my backers, and like getting that feedback is something that I'm really excited about. And creating a good product is something that I'm very excited about. So I wanted to make sure that the playtest, like that was something that I thought of like before I even did any research. I was like, I want to do a playtest with these people afterwards. But I haven't seen it in very many Kickstarters, but I think that they should. But I understand why they don't. It's more work for me. Whereas instead I could have just been like, here's your PDF. Good luck. You already paid me. Whatever.
Your DM can change it if they don't like it.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, there's certainly, there's the obvious customer service benefit to it, but there's also a social capital investment, like a long-term social capital investment that you're making, that if you make all those people happy, then they'll probably come back to you. If you just, send them a fucking broken shoe, then they're not going to be into it the next time.
Broken shoe is
Very
actually one of
true.
the items, though.
I want it to be.
I do have a quick follow-up of that. Not only is just the idea of making a better product make the people more likely to come back, but you're also doing a play test with these people. So I imagine there's a fraction of the community that did not do a play test with you, and there's a fraction of the community that did. I'd be really interested to see what fraction of the backers for the next Kickstarter come from both groups. I imagine, just hypothetically, that the backers that are doing the playtesting with you are the ones that are going to be like the day one backers next time around.
Yeah, probably. That would make sense. Like, it seems like the people that are the most hyped about it are the people that want to do the playtest. So, yeah.
Roughly how many backers did you have?
300 and something.
And roughly how many are interactive with the playtest to any capacity?
Maybe 20. It's kind of hard to tell right now because the playtest, people aren't going to be able to organize a game like within a week or two, and the Kickstarter just ended at the end of March. So I know of a lot of people that were commenting that they aren't quite ready to have it in their campaign yet, but they plan on introducing it later on, which may or may not fall within the playtest. And there aren't a lot of people out there that are just like at the drop of a hat can just be like, all right, everybody, we're going to play with cyberware now in our D&D 5e game. So I'd say about 20 people have responded to like my updates regarding the playtest. But I haven't gotten a lot of feedback on my Google form yet, but it's still like super early.
Right. I think that one thing that might be useful in future, I'm just spitballing here, future campaigns is people want to be involved in the process, right? They want to feel like they're being part of a game. They're making a game, not just being a part of playing a game, but actually the production of it. So to these people, next time around, you could say, hey guys, do you have any ideas for next time, whether it's like your monster manual or more items or whatever it is? Guys, do you have ideas for this stuff? And then get them involved. So then maybe they'll be more willing to shell out for the premium tier because that's something that they have put, themselves into the product.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword though, right? Because like when you set up a tier that people that people pay money for to get their thing into your game or whatever it is that you're making, then you're kind of obligated to put that thing in the game even if it doesn't fit. And you don't know anything about your backers. So it might degrade the value of your product by having that much collaboration, which was my thought initially.
That's true. And you can also guide them with it. It's like, so that's the first pitch. Then you say, well, hey, what about this? And then they don't feel that they're shut out of the process. So let's say they suggest a giant hairy testicle monster. And you're like, that's not really in my scheme. How about a giant mecha testicle monster? And then they're like, yeah, I can see how that fits.
Yeah, definitely. But I'm not as socially adept as you. So doing that.
Also, will you be creating a sense of expectation? If people are paying to be part of the process, but then their ideas aren't getting used, are they going to get?
Well, that's fine. It's the yes and of the process. So it's like the improv. It's yes and. So they say something stupid, and then you say, yeah, and it has vents on it.
Right.
Moose is more socially adept than both of us, Ethan. I don't know if this would work.
Totally agree. I mean, it doesn't take a lot. It's a low bar for me.
You're looking at the extent of my sociability right now.
Same.
So, are you going to jump into your next Kickstarter like right away? Do you have ideas for one? What's
I want to, but I already made a commitment to do this comic commission. So probably after I do this comic commission, I'll probably jump into the next one and get that started so I can keep the momentum going as much as I can.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not really sure I haven't decided 100% on what the next project's going to be. I have to do a little bit more research and figure out, I want to do this in a way that makes sense. I want to build this world in a way that makes sense for my consumers, for my backers, and not have it feel disjointed. So I need to be very careful about what my next step is going to be.
I imagined that it was going to be the mech monster manual. That was just my first thought, because you already have most of the assets made for that anyway. If you were just to copy and paste your mecha doodles.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that as my next thing. But also, people have been asking about like a setting where this makes sense. And like I have my comic out, lineage.exe on Webtoon. Look at me doing marketing stuff. But it doesn't really, notes. Yeah, it doesn't really show the back end for the GM. It just shows what the player facing part of it, basically. And people have been asking about the more GM side of things so that they can run a game that's kind of like that. And so part of me is like, maybe I should do like a little bit of like a setting primer instead of the monster manual first. So we'll see.
Given that you have the audience that's captive at this, not captive, well, kind of captive because we're still in the pandemic.
You don't know what I do, Moose.
Okay, and also you have you're hot off the heels of a prior Kickstarter. I would say, personal advice, not that you're paying for it or anything like that. So whatever it is that's quickest is the way to go, just so you can strike while the iron is hot, or at least not cool down entirely after the comic.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of Venn diagrams. It's like the fastest thing, the best thing for the consumer, and also the least pain in the ass thing to do. That I have to like figure out what product is in the middle of those Venn diagrams.
The unicorn mech.
Perfect.
Getting a lot of hype for the testicle mech in chat. Just want to let you know.
Well, if you want something like that to happen, actually, I can't do that on Twitch. I was going to say when I have my stream, you could do that, but
I've already shouted out your link and sent them your way. So
appreciate it.
You could disguise it somehow. There's probably a way to work that into the TOS regulations.
You can just say like gay mate, and it's weird smelling for the reproductive organs, and then just have that turn from mate to mech. So game mech.
This is just a bag of beans.
I want you to say gay mate on stream while you're talking about doing the
It's been a long time since I was in college and heard this term used frequently, so my pronunciation is going to be a little wrong. I still have to not say skeletal because of the way one teacher said it to me. Anyway. All right, so I've derailed
I don't
this
even know
entirely.
what the next question was. You gotta pick up.
All right, you opted to go with digital only. Do you think that was a good thing or a bad thing this time around?
I think that I would have had more backers if I had given a physical product, but digital was easier for me, and also I felt like while spreading COVID through mailing is like very low, I figured why would I want to even put a little bit more stress onto that system during this time? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't need to. So, and then later on I can do physical copies. Like, there's nothing stopping me from doing physical copies after this. And if people want a physical copy, then they could do it, or they could get it then.
But was it something that, keeping it digital only, was that something that kept the initial bump to actually start working on it lower, so you actually got started at all?
Maybe. I'm not really. I can't really say for sure, right? Like, I would have to do an A/B test, and I don't have the B tests, so.
Sure. I just mean, like, some people, like, when they're doing art or starting a project, there's something that seems it's actually insignificant, but just is this one thing they don't want to do. Like, oh, I lost 10 minutes of progress in my game because I didn't save enough. So now I have to do that 10 minutes all over again. You know, it's not that big of a deal, but it might have stopped them from continuing on. So if it was but it doesn't sound like the idea of a physical book is something that was going to hamstring you to start a project or not.
No. If I felt like that, like, if there was no pandemic or anything, I probably would have done a physical copy. It's not really a problem. Kind of that thing that we were talking about at the very beginning of the podcast, when we were talking about how there, like, I felt like there was that wall of keeping me out of making art for a living, because I wasn't talented enough or whatever, has kind of instilled in me, like, if I feel like I want to do something, I'm just going to do it. Like, I don't think about whether I can do it or like, I'll figure out how to do it. It's fine. So, like, offering physical copies is not something that would stop me from making a Kickstarter.
It would just cut into the profit and maybe have to raise the price that you put for each book. That's about it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it would have changed how the Kickstarter ran, maybe, but other than that, it wouldn't have affected my ability or willingness to create it.
So we all see the final goal, the final funding amount. How did that break down into profit versus expenditures, and how did that break down into, like, $1 per hour if you had to spitball it or ballpark it?
You know, I didn't do that math, but so I didn't do the math because, like, I did the math for creating the art, and I did the math for making the rules and stuff like that. And for that, I am not quite breaking even yet, but I viewed this as an investment. So, like, if you were to ask me, like, what the profit was for this project, I would say I'm in the red still, but that was a loss that I was willing to take, because, first of all, I'll be selling this product, like, after the Kickstarter. This isn't the end. This is the beginning, as lame as that phrase is. But also, I'm building up an audience for my next project and the project after that I do in this line. So I didn't really view it in that way. I wasn't too worried about the numbers in that regard. It was more just like, this is the number that I need to hit so that I can eat comfortably.
So you still have the contact info for all the prior people that backed you, as well as people that followed, I believe, the prior campaign?
I don't know if I have. I don't think I have the resource or the people that followed, but the people that backed for sure.
So hopefully all those people will be the day one purchases, especially the people that were interactive in the playtesting. So
Exactly. That's the hope.
And you'll boost the algorithm the first day, and then you'll get even more names. And since you have a very specific genre, theme, style, you'll just keep people in this lane. So you keep adding to the Mecha Mountain.
That's right. The Mecha Ball.
Moose, when you talk about maintaining or keeping track of people from that had supported previous campaigns, are you talking about like keeping track of like emails and stuff like that?
Right. He still has the email list from this campaign. So I still get emails from prior campaigns that like for their future campaigns, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, but not right now. Or or sometimes it's, oh cool, this thing I liked before, there's more of it.
So that's like, I don't want to say it's like you're just adding people to an emailing list. I don't know. I always feel like a little bit weird about adding people to an emailing list that they didn't sign up for themselves. But
no, it's not like that. It's like, so like the most straightforward way that Kickstarter has of doing this is the update system. So when my next Kickstarter goes live, I can put an update on this Kickstarter and be like, hey, the next edition of this Kickstarter line is going, and they all get an email saying that.
I see.
But then also like I can put out a survey to get their emails, and if they want to be on the email list, then they'll give me their email and I'll add them to a list. And then there's also sites like BackerKit that will do it automatically. So they like connect to your Kickstarter, and then I'm going to use the word harvest. They harvest the emails from the backers and then allow you to send out an email through them to your previous backers for your previous projects.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. This is all good information for me too, being and I have this love-hate relationship with Kickstarter now.
Amen. Don't we all?
Yeah, I think everyone has been burned by Kickstarter at least once. At least I imagine that's the case. I backed a project that turned out entirely different from what it was projected to be, and I'm still salty about that. So I pretty much at this point only back projects from friends, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why I wanted to be pretty much done with my project also, was so that I can definitively be like, this is what I'm putting out, nothing different, and this is exactly what you're going to get, and I don't want any sort of miscommunication there.
You should start every post with more cake, that comic.
Perfect.
So you mentioned that you'll continue to sell this product after all is said and done with the whole Kickstarter process. Where do you plan on making that available?
Hopefully it'll be on drive-through RPG.com. I think it's .com. It's like a major tabletop RPG PDF store. So
it seems like a giant pit of RPG stuff. So I'm not sure how you get visibility on that site.
I haven't gotten there yet, so I don't know. But why I know plenty of people that have done it. So
why did you decide to go with drive-through as opposed to DM's Guild, which is another one?
So DM's Guild has a lot of strings attached to it that I don't think that I'm following any of the guidelines that they require. And also, I don't think you can actually do a Kickstarter for a DM's Guild product.
Right. It has to be exclusively through DM's Guild. They don't allow it to be sold anywhere else.
So that's the biggest reason.
Okay,
it'll also be available like on my website and stuff like that. But drive-through obviously has the audience already.
Does the Kickstarter... Go ahead.
Good.
Does the Kickstarter page itself stay up? Like, could people go to the Kickstarter page now and buy it?
So not currently, but in about a week, people will be able to do that. Fingers crossed.
What happens in
barring technical difficulties? So in 2 weeks, or after 2 weeks of the Kickstarter ending, that's when funds are dispersed to like my account, and then my consultants will be setting up a late backing platform that I'm not 100% on. I just know that it exists. Like, I know that it exists. I don't know how to do it. But well, there goes Moose. So once that gets going, then they can like click a button and back it late, basically, and get access to the Kickstarter. So if this sounds like something that you're interested in, cyberware inside of a D&D campaign. You'll be able to back it within the week, hopefully.
I think what you should do is copy and paste this, change all the cyberware to cyber stuff, and then post it to DM's Guild.
Perfect. And then
They'll never
like
suspect a thing.
I could just put like a Photoshop filter over all my art. That way it's like different, a little different.
Or you can put it through what's it, Dream Machine or Deep Dream Generator, the AI thing.
There you go. It would probably make it even more like Lovecraftian, Cronenberg-esque with all like the eyes and stuff that it always puts in. That might be interesting as like I might have to try that later with my Mechadoodles.
I mean, it's always fun to mess around and say, all right, this artist's work with this artist's style, what happens? Oh, God.
Well, we're coming up close to the end of our questions. There were a couple of questions that we saved from the chat that had come up before. They weren't quite relevant at the time, but I think that there's some space to touch on them now. One was your opinion on things like Etsy, and I think you had touched a little bit on about your threadless shop. Was it threadless or?
Yep.
Yeah, and I know I've seen T-shirts for a lot of your stuff before. You've got very merch friendly stuff, but you were also saying you don't promote it very much. Aside from just the kind of like lack of promotion, do you have any kind of thoughts or opinions on artists using platforms like that?
I think they should do it because like, what's the worst that can happen? You get passive income like $5 every year. Like if nobody sees it, like it's out there. So maybe someday somebody will happen upon my T-shirt shop, even though I don't promote it. And then maybe I'll start getting sales from there. Maybe they'll share it with somebody and maybe I'll find my niche and start making money off of T-shirts. And all I did was, spend a couple hours uploading images, like 5 minutes at a time over the course of like weeks. And now I have an income based off of something that I did way long ago and I didn't have to do anything for.
Are we allowed to talk about the Illustrati?
Yeah. Representing.
All right. So this was the group that you were talking about earlier with the group of comic book illustrators, correct?
Yep.
Is it all comic book or is there other types of illustration involved?
All the people who run it make comics. So, and I guess the server as a whole is like mostly comic artists for sure, because like a lot of our Discord members, I guess what you'd call them, come from Walter Osley's YouTube channel, which is all about webtoon creation. So.
And is it an open platform for people to visit, or is it one of the closed ones where you have to know somebody in order to get in?
No, yeah, anybody can join in. I'll provide the link for the description and all that stuff.
Yeah, we'll include that link in the show notes after the fact.
And so like if you're interested in making comics, come and check us out. The Illustrati Discord will help you with whatever you need.
Can confirm everybody there is very cool, very open, very friendly. Another question was about social burnout. It's kind of come up a lot throughout this, being kind of exhausted easily by lots of social interactions. So in a career that mandates at least a certain amount of that, what do you do to avoid burnout or deal with it when it happens?
I try to like know my limits. Like I won't like force myself to be, on Twitter or whatever, like all day. Like I'll force myself away from it, or just ignore it when I am not feeling up to it, because it's just so easy to get burnt out. There are certain times where it's like I allot that time for me to get burned out. Like I was saying at the beginning of the Kickstarter, it's like, all right, I know that this is going to make me not want to like interact with people for very long afterwards. But it's something that I have to do to like get my project off the ground. So I think it's something that you kind of, when you're somebody like me who gets burned out on it easily, you kind of just need to like know that it's going to happen if you push yourself, and like where that line is going to be, basically.
Since I know there's a lot of people involved that are in the to play tabletop RPGs, you can imagine playing a character that's a salesman or something, whatever it takes in order to get out there and post your stuff. Like, a lot of times on social media, I don't act like myself. I put exclamation points in, and I put a lot more smiley faces than I otherwise would. I'm playing a role, and it's just easier for me to think about it as I'm some happy guy that everybody wants to be friends with. In reality, I'm this. Nobody likes me. It's fine. But that's basically, I help people, and some people seem to appreciate that, and that's my life. But if I had to market my own art all the time as myself, I would be the most boring person to follow on social media. So you have to pretend to be somebody else. And that can be draining as well. But if you think about it in a game context, maybe it'll be fine. Hey, I have to negotiate this with my high charisma and get the merchant to lower the price to 50 gold by my correct way of speaking through all this. Learn the way that the people that are good at this stuff talk, and talk like them. I kind of hate this, though, to be honest. There is a person who was involved in the EverQuest community as one of their community managers, and I was hurt when I met him in person. On the show, he was, "Hey guys, it's so good to see you all. Yeah, come on down to the studio. It'll be great. I'll give you a tour myself." And in person, he was, "Oh, hey Moose. Yeah, so welcome to our studio. I have Meredith over here. She's going to give you a tour. I can't believe you actually showed up." And he was like that all the time. When he was talking to somebody who he wanted something from, he would be, "Hey, it's good to see you. Let's get a drink. I'll buy you a beer." And then if he was talking to me or somebody he didn't have anything to get from, it felt like a very transactional relationship with them. And it was, "Oh, okay, how much of my time do I have to give to you before you leave me alone?" So that's my rant. But yeah.
It's a good rant. And I think the takeaway could be like just the first part of your rant was good advice. Not that the second half was bad, just that like that I'd never thought about it that before, of like, you know, like playing a role, like literally like role playing a role, like pretending that you're just like an actor in this movie. I think that there's something to that. And to the second part, you know, of it being a dangerous game to play, I guess maybe just, you know, don't come into it with this acquisitive mindset where you're like, "Oh, what can I squeeze out of this by pretending to be this role?" So yeah, I guess as long as you're not doing that.
I mean, I think it's about putting forward your best self, as cheesy as that sounds. Like just almost manufacturing like the version of you that you wish that you could like be for people, and like you only need to interact with those people on a small scale, so it's like much easier to like be that person for those people rather than the person that you are for yourself, I guess.
Yeah, Allie mentioned it being like a person wears many hats, and sometimes they have to put on this hat in order to and that's true. Yeah, what was it? Shakespeare said, "World is but a stage, and in a role, in a lifetime, a man plays many roles," or something like that. This is going back to high school, and I don't remember that very well, so I butchered that quote, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, well, the Russian novelist from the 1800s that I read.
No, the composer.
Oh, right. Okay. That's lame, putting an inside joke into a podcast. Like nobody has any idea what we're talking about. Luckily, it's the end. If you've made it this far, God bless you. There's so many places for people to find you, Ethan. We're going to include all of the links in the show notes. You know, all the awesome things that you're working on. If there was one place though that you would like people to go to, where would you like people to find you?
Twitter is where I'm going to be most active, so check me out there.
And that, I think, brings us to our trademark final question. Aside from personal work, personal projects, and business, what's one thing in the world that's happening right now that you're excited about?
All right, so I have two answers because my first answer is going to be kind of lame. So my first answer is there's this animated show on Amazon, Invincible, which I am thoroughly loving. But I don't want to say anything about it because I'm one of those people who's like super into like no spoiler thing, other than to say you should go watch it. Even if you read the comic, like the animation is pretty awesome. And then my second answer is kind of spicy, which is NFTs. I'm actually really excited about those.
Go ahead.
I know I could see Moose's face when I said it. It was awesome to see it like in real time. Not necessarily because of the art stuff, but just because of the applications of NFT. Like I think it's something that should have been around for a long time, and just having the blockchain be used for more than just coins, I think is really important and really cool.
Yeah, I think you're going to find a very nice audience for your NFT love on Twitter. I hear they're great at it. No,
I hear that too.
Actually, I've heard that there is a very fond community for NFTs on Twitter and a very anti-NFT community on Twitter. So it's just a matter of which one you're embedded with. Whatever.
I'm not really planning on releasing them anytime soon if I'm going to. So it's just more the abstract idea of like what they could do. I think is cool.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just glad that you didn't say vaccines. I'm so sick of people saying fucking vaccines. I mean, really? Who cares about that?
I had my vaccine on Friday, first one.
Oh my
So
God.
I'm sore as hell today. So if you see me moving around in my chair, it's just because I hurt all over.
But you see, I'm not excited about vaccines because then I'm going to not have my excuse to be a hermit anymore. So I'm not really excited about that.
I mean, you could just, really ride the wave of popularity from your NFT support and just go full anti-vax, man.
Wow.
All right, so now that we're canceled, I was going to say, I don't remember if I mentioned it on the podcast before, but I'm now working from home all the time anyway, even after the pandemic is over. My boss is just like, yeah, we've discovered that we don't actually need to be in the office all the time, and Zoom is good enough. So you can take your stuff home and be a hermit for the rest of your life.
That's awesome. I would say I'm jealous, but I mean, that's the life I chose as well.
Well, Ethan, thank you so much, man. This has been fantastic. Really appreciate you indulging us with all of the social energy. I'm not saying that sarcastic or snarkily. I know how it be, and I feel your pain, and I really appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And after this, I'll probably just like veg out for probably the rest of the night.
After we talk about Shadowrun.
Right, got to do that.
All right, cool. Well, I'll leave you guys to that. I'm going to hit end.